All right. So now, if you've already read this particular section in the Kreft text, your head may be about to explode. That is the section 15 or page 15, bottom of page 15 to page 25, the introduction section, part three, the two logics. That's what we're talking about here. Just in case you forgot what I was talking about there. I suppose that that's a good thing in one sense that you're being challenged. In another sense, there may be a call for a little more clarification there. Now, Kreft does the bulk of your reading this week, all the way up from 15, all the way up to somewhere around 23, page 23 or something like that. The bulk of your reading is Kreft describing some epistemological positions in the history of philosophy, and namely those positions, specifically his mentioning of Hume and Immanuel Kant there, their quote unquote contribution, if we want to say that in a nice way, was to pull the philosopher, pull the student away from a nature and essence. Now, luckily, we've already went over that a little last week in what you've listened to in those two lectures that you listened to last week about natures and essences and what that actually is supposed to mean, universals, what that's supposed to mean. Now, this is one of those aspects too where Kreft has gotten us to the point to how he's trying to at least give a little background on how we got to that problem. Now, I want to buttress what Kreft has said up until this point. So you're about to look at another video, part of an introduction to philosophy course video that goes into a lot more depth about that whole nature or that relationship between observation, induction, as it were, looking at things and being able to abstract that nature or essence. Because obviously, as you've been able to call from this reading, that if that falls, if that relationship falls, if the method of knowing called induction is not allowing us to pull these natures or essences, and we have no access to this real causal relationship between things, then we see that the classical school of logic, sometimes called Aristotelian logic, or just sometimes called everyday logic, we see that relationship or that system of thought starts to collapse because we now all of a sudden we're not dealing with, let's say, for lack of better words, true outcomes, true conclusions that really do correspond to reality, where you have to default more to something like here with symbolic logic, something that more or less works with our observation, but may or may not necessarily be, in the most robust sense possible, true, quote unquote, in that it corresponds to reality. Now, notice that Kreft is not trying to beat up, as it were, symbolic logic. He starts off saying, look, it is superior in one sense to use symbolic logic and for aspects such as keeping things simplistic, being able to quickly go through certain arguments. But of course, he wants to go on to point out the deficiencies of symbolic logic over Aristotelian logic. Because remember, the key concept here is that Aristotelian logic or classical logic is we're really trying to figure out the nature of things. We're trying to figure out truths that really do, in the most robust sense possible, correspond to the way reality actually is. I mean, otherwise, why have an argument at all? Why take a course in logic and try to get to some conclusion with someone that you're speaking with or trying to argue with, in the good sense of the word argue, but really be no closer to the nature of reality at the end of your argument? What's really the point? So I think that Kreft does a good job on the remaining two pages, just talking about some of the implications of no pun intended, material implication of logic there, of the symbolic logic there. And then he even says that you can go through and look a little more of that if you desire on page 364, something like that, one of the the appendices in the back. Yeah, appendix 364, page 364. You can look at that a little further. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and put up this other lecture that's going to try to buttress this whole notion of induction and investigate or talk through if David Hume was right. That we really don't have, that we do have what has come to be known as a problem, quote unquote, problem of induction. Do we have a problem of induction? Because remember, this is remember, all of even your deductive syllogisms, if you made it this far into the course, remember, by this point that even deductive syllogisms rely on induction most often for their premises, right? So again, the classical example, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Well, that's a deductive argument that gives you a certain conclusion, right? If the premises are true, then the conclusion follows whether you like it or not. But as you've noticed, each of those premises, all men are mortal. Well, how do you know that all men are mortal? Well, by induction, right? By that type of reasoning. And so we want to look at if Hume is right, well, then you really don't know, do you, that those premises, the individual premises of your argument, are actually true or not. You just kind of have some sort of, you think that they may be, but we really don't know that. Now, again, if you're able to extract something like a nature and essence from the things that you're observing, induction, as it were, well, then you don't have a problem necessarily. If you really are, at least in principle, you don't have a problem because you're able to know something about the thing, something that's true of the thing outside of yourself, true about reality, the nature of the thing. So without further ado, you can go ahead and skip down and look at this next lecture that talks about that.